1903. Two young guys, hands absolutely covered in grease, are aggressively bolting a crude combustion engine onto a standard bicycle frame. They're standing in the mud of a tiny Milwaukee backyard, just trying to build a machine that can conquer America's dirt roads without having to pedal.
Okay, let's dive right into this. William Harley and Arthur Davidson were working in a shed so impossibly small that the name they painted on the door, Harley-Davidson, literally eclipsed the entire building. They weren't setting out to create some massive global lifestyle brand or start a cultural movement, you know? They just wanted to make this motorized bicycle actually work.
From that muddy, super humble origin, nobody, and I mean nobody, could have predicted the colossal American icon it would rapidly become. I mean, think about it. That rudimentary, rattling machine born in a cramped wooden box would eventually morph into the ultimate symbol of absolute freedom, loud rebellion, and the whole sprawling myth of the open highway.
But you know what really fundamentally transformed the company? Global war. By the time World War II erupted, Harley-Davidson wasn't just some novelty act anymore. They were a vital military asset. To put that into perspective, just look at one staggering number: 90,000. That's how many Liberator models that cranked out for the Allied forces. American soldiers rode these heavy beasts right through the sand of North Africa, the brutal hedgerows of Normandy, and straight into the heart of Germany.
And when those millions of soldiers finally came home, well, a lot of them found they couldn't just switch off that combat adrenaline. All across the American landscape, returning veterans started forming riding clubs, swarming the newly paved highways in these tight, aggressive packs. Which brings us to a really pivotal weekend, the 4th of July 1947 in Hollister, California. A massive motorcycle rally supposedly spiraled completely out of control, or at least that's what the media said. But here is where things get really wild. This whole dangerous outlaw biker identity, the absolute core of the Harley myth, was basically an accidental byproduct of media sensationalism. No way, right? Life magazine published a highly staged, completely fake photograph of a drunk guy on a motorcycle at that Hollister rally. Hollywood took one look at that and ran with it. Marlon Brando starred in The Wild One in 1953, and boom, the outlaw biker was permanently burned into the American imagination. Real organizations like the Hells Angels, founded back in '48, literally just adopted this Hollywood script and made Harley-Davidson their official prop.
So now Harley-Davidson is trapped in this impossible position. They're a legitimate public business, absolutely terrified by this outlaw association, and they straight up refuse to endorse these dangerous clubs. But the executives couldn't exactly deny the financial reality staring them in the face. That thunderous, aggressive roar of defiance, it sold a massive amount of motorcycles. The machine wasn't just transportation anymore, it was a loud, defiant, walking around with a chip on your shoulder lifestyle.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when that lifestyle collides with brutal corporate mismanagement. In 1969, AMF, the American Machine and Foundry Company, bought out Harley-Davidson. Guys, they treated motorcycles exactly like bowling equipment. They mass-produced them and completely gutted quality control. We're talking Harleys leaking oil right on the showroom floor, bolts literally vibrating loose on the highway. Meanwhile, cheaper, vastly more reliable Japanese rivals flooded the market. Harley's dominant 80% market share absolutely cratered to under 25%. The brand was bleeding out.
Facing total extinction in 1981, 13 executives, including Willie G. Davidson, the grandson of the original co-founder, made an incredibly audacious gamble. They scraped together exactly $80 million and bought their dying company back from AMF. So, okay, they own the legendary name again, but they desperately needed a miracle to actually build a functional motorcycle.
To pull off that miracle, they did something nobody saw coming. The ultimate, fiercely patriotic American rebel brand saved itself by quietly traveling to Japan. I know, right? The new executives walked the factory floors of their fiercest competitors and meticulously copied the corporate management and manufacturing systems of Toyota. They brought back just-in-time inventory, rigorous quality checks, and totally rebuilt their Milwaukee production lines from the ground up using Japanese efficiency.
With the bikes actually reliable again, they just needed to win back the riders. Willie G. Davidson leaned hard into the myth. He redesigned the machines to heavily emphasize that classic, low-slung, chrome-drenched American rebel look. And in 1983, they launched HOG, the Harley Owners Group. This wasn't some cheap marketing gimmick. It was a factory-sponsored community that turned solitary customers into a massive, fanatical tribe. Suddenly, doctors, lawyers, and corporate executives were paying massive premiums to play outlaw on the weekends, pushing revenues to an astronomical $5.6 billion by 2008. Yet beneath all that massive success,
A new void was already taking root. Harley's fiercely loyal core demographic was aging rapidly into their late 50s, and the new generation replacing them, well, millennials weren't exactly dreaming of heavy, expensive, incredibly loud two-wheeled machines. They were prioritizing pristine, silent, highly efficient ride-sharing apps. The whole cultural desire for loud mechanical rebellion was just fading.
The financial reality of that demographic shift was absolutely brutal. Between 2014 and 2020, U.S. motorcycle sales plunged by 25%. Harley-Davidson stock price was violently sliced in half. The rebellion was simply aging out of the market, and younger folks just weren't buying into the roaring, leather-clad fantasy anymore.
Desperate to adapt, Harley unveiled the all-electric LiveWire in 2019. It cost an eye-watering $30,000, looked super sleek, and could do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds flat. But it didn't rumble. That signature thumping V-twin heartbeat that announced your arrival from literally a mile away was totally gone. Instead, you got this high-pitched, futuristic whine. It completely alienated the longtime loyalists who felt betrayed, while simultaneously failing to capture those modern minimalists.
120 years ago, two young men strapped a crude engine to a bicycle in a tiny, mud-soaked wooden shed, really just to see how fast it could go. Today, that exact same machine sits right at the edge of a massive, quiet void. Can a brand entirely built on deafening noise, pure defiance, and the myth of the open highway actually survive in a world that increasingly values silence, sustainability, and screens?